Next up, we have a fireside chat on the topic, Making AI Ubiquitous for India, Scaling Adoption. We have a very eminent panel for this fireside chat. Please welcome Arundhati Bhattacharya, CEO and Chairperson, Salesforce India. In her role, Arundhati oversees the growth strategy of the company and plays an integral role in defining Salesforce's relationship with the ecosystem of customers, partners, and community across India. Prior to Salesforce, Arundhati Bhattacharya was the first woman chairperson at the State Bank of India. Joining Arundhati is Dr. Sangita Reddy, Joint Managing Director, Apollo Hospitals. Dr. Sangita Reddy is a global healthcare leader, an Indian entrepreneur and humanitarian. As mentioned, she is the Joint Managing Director of Apollo Hospitals Enterprises Limited, Asia's largest and most trusted healthcare group. Chairing this session is Debjani Ghosh, President NASSCOM. I'd like to welcome the ladies, and over to you, Debjani.
Thank you very much, Justin. And what a fabulous panel to start the AI Experience Summit with. Thank you so much, Arundhati and Dr. Sangita Reddy, for joining me today on this extremely important topic of making AI ubiquitous in India. So I'm going to start with you first, Sangita. There is no doubt about AI potential in India today, right? A NASSCOM and McKinsey report last year estimated that it's anything up to around $500 billion by 2025, provided we implement right. And I think therein lies the biggest challenge, because the ROI is not going to come from just the tech sector. It's going to come from healthcare. It's going to come from manufacturing, from retail, et cetera, and their ability to use AI to improve productivity, to improve efficiency, etc. So do you believe that these verticals are doing enough to unlock the full potential of AI? And how would you rate progress today in the healthcare industry? And any learnings that you can share from Apollo that can help some of the other verticals and CEOs in thinking about their AI adoption plans?
So Debjani, let me first begin by saying I'm super excited to be on this panel. And I truly believe in the great potential of AI, not just in terms of the dollar numbers it represents, but being in healthcare in terms of the value to life and the value in saving life. And I think one of the greatest challenges that business have had to face in the recent years is just how they approach data and analytics, and now how they deploy artificial intelligence. So it's all kind of been moving so fast, and everybody's in the middle of some kind of major transformation. Yeah. And it's hard enough to create a data-driven culture, to compete on the basis of analytics, to look at data-driven products and services and so forth. And in healthcare, to get doctors to adopt and to believe and to say, hey, in some things, I'm very careful about AI in healthcare. I don't call it artificial intelligence. I call it assisted intelligence, because we're assisting the doctor to do things better. But truly, it's like, where there's so many things happening at the same time. But I just want to share that a few tenets that I think we're following in our approach to AI. So number one is, I think we are doing as far as possible, processing and correlation of any of the imperatives that we're following and correlating it to real world evidence from our own environments as well as from global environments. And once we see clear evidence and the ability to capture it, we're then hard coding it into dynamic clinical workflows. So for example, the work we did with Microsoft showed a cardiac risk analysis based on a set of 17 different parameters, very, conceptually similar to what was called the Framingham risk score. But when we applied the Apollo Microsoft risk score, we had a 98% accuracy compared to Framingham on an India population, which was under 70%. Yeah. So when you see that and you show this, then you put it into the workflow. So you say, whenever there's a health check, whenever there's a cardiac patient, just apply the risk, and therefore your antenna goes up in terms of how much more you need to do for that patient with a higher risk or a risk above 80%. The other one is that we looked at what is our expectation of long-term data collection, because very often the whole aspect is not just about the episode of a patient when they're in the hospital, which is 5 days, 7 days, but really the longitudinal patient record. And our commitment to this was really that almost 10 years ago, we began our journey around what we call the personal health record. So we put in a separate repository, inpatient, outpatient, patient's own data into this PHR, and now using condition management, or what they're now beginning to call digital therapeutics, and linking this with IoT. So make it as pervasive, as simple, and as much a part of your daily workflow. It's not something separate or esoteric. It's a great tool on your table. And that's what we're trying to build into all our AI. I think in India, we are lucky with the opportunity to validate over larger ethnic groups and larger geographic areas. And we are trying to also participate in global data collaboratives. We are very excited about the potential or the prospects of making patient recommendations based on genetics. So if a doctor is a disbeliever and we just give them this one piece of information saying that precision medicine and genotype phenotype analysis is going to help you understand if a patient is more likely to develop a bleed, if a patient is more likely to have a recurrence of their oncology, and therefore make sure you follow all the protocols and don't just do first-line treatment. Genetic biomarkers are making things so much faster, and baking that into the entire workflow is transforming healthcare into what we're calling precision medicine. So I can go on and on about this, Debjani, but I think in a simple line, it is you put the value and the outcome first, and then the difficult process of adoption becomes worthwhile because you have that.
Absolutely, and that's so beautifully said. And you have to know what's in it for you. As you rightly said, if the doctors realize how it will help them become even better, I think that's where the needle shifts.
Absolutely, it's that eureka moment for them, kind of.
Yeah. And one doctor I follow a lot on social media, Dr. Eric Topol, has beautifully said it. He said, AI actually helps doctors become much more humane because it gives us time for those personal interactions.
I completely agree, because if you're trying to validate in your mind, 25 recent reports and what's the best treatment plan, how are you going to look at the patient, smile, and maybe say, you're wearing a really nice sari? But imagine if you could press the button and you had on your screen these 5 recommendations, you're then reassured that, look, I have the latest and the best for my patient. Let me spend my time communicating this well and focusing on compliance, on making them as comfortable as possible, enabling the journey. And all those are the humane and the fun parts of healthcare.
Oh, absolutely. Arundhati, coming to you, you have experienced both sides of it. I mean, as chairman of SBI, you have led the digitization of one of the largest banks of India. And now you're working with CEOs of various sectors, manufacturing, retail, banks, etc., to help them in their digitization journeys. So, you have a fantastic perspective of how it works. And what, according to you, are some of the biggest challenges for these traditional vectors or for the CEOs to grapple with in order for them to successfully implement technologies like AI for better business results?
So basically, again, I think something that Sangita said at the end, it's a question of showing them the value. And I think, AI is something that's going to become as ubiquitous as electricity. It's going to be there at the background for almost every single thing, and you won't notice it because it will become such an integral part of everything that we do. Now, if you're looking at businesses basically, they will go for what they believe yields value. Now, you have to show them that AI is really something that's giving you stuff which is really and truly, there's a quantum leap forward. It's not a small leap, it's a quantum leap forward. And that AI is something that will become over a period of time is absolutely conversational. It'll be part of the conversations, right? It has to be driven with purpose. What's the purpose that we are going to get at? But it also needs to be nurtured by its values. Because just like anything that is very, very powerful, there is also always that fear or that concern that it may be used for the wrong purposes, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very sure that you're building the things that are meant for the general good. And for doing that, you have to convince business that, this is something that is required not only as a win-win for your company, but as a win-win for your customer. So both the customer and the company must necessarily, win from this particular initiative. And if you're able to convince that, most CEOs will do whatever it takes in order to get it in. Having said that, I think there are still quite a number of rocks that need to be either moved or, they need to be blasted through, either of the two. And I think a few of them, one, of course, is digital maturity itself. Unfortunately, I find when the reports come in regarding the number of people that are required to be skilled in IT in India in order for it to be at a particular place, we are looking at the skills that are required from out of India for global delivery. There is really no separate reckoning of the skills that are required, the number of people that are required for Indian delivery. And there I find, we are not doing that, because Indian industry, if you look at many of the reports that come in, we are still a follower, we are not a leader. Whereas for implementations, we are leaders. But for actual adoption, we are still followers. And that is where I think, business has the biggest rock. They need to get around this idea that this is something that's going to really and truly bring value to their business. And again, the other thing is policy. What are the policies that ensure that, you are able to, AI does best when it has the biggest amount of data possible, okay? The bigger the data set, the better will be your learning from the AI, and the better will be the results. Now, if you're looking at that, then there are several other policy measures that we still need to go through. And you are part of that, and you know it, that the way that we need to work on the policy. Similarly is the position regarding cloud. Again, cloud enables you to have the elasticity to have as much data as possible pumped in, okay? But there again, there are policy issues that need to be clarified. So I think if you're looking at business per se across the world, that's a separate issue. If you're looking at business in India, then I think, very clearly, they need to see the value, they need to have the policy backup, and they need to have the skills. I think if these three things are put in place, there is absolutely no reason why our business people will be any further, behind the rest of the world in actually utilizing AI, because the results are really, as Sangita said, they give you that aha moment. It just tells you, oh my God, it was there all the time in front of me and I never saw it. Okay. So the actual utilization of data, we all say data is the new oil and keep talking about it. But the use of data really and truly, it gives results when AI is put to actually work on it. So I think, these are things that we need to get, all lined up, the ducks in a row. Only then you will find business really benefiting from AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you've talked about three ducks that need to fall in line. I think there's also a fourth duck that we have to think about. And this had come out in a McKinsey survey in 2022, which showed that the organizations that are witnessing around a 2x impact of their AI initiatives are most likely to have a very engaged and knowledgeable champion in their C-suite, right? Now, is this something that we see happening, you see happening? And this is a question to both of you, in Indian companies, in Indian businesses, where Are we building the right partnerships between business technology team in the C-suite, in boards? Is that happening? And any advice that you have for CEOs out there?
Okay. So, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. I think it was in that same McKinsey study or in another one, they said that, the digital transformation had been kicked off by 80% of the companies that they surveyed, but it had been completed in only 3%. And the difference between this rest and the 3% was the fact that in this 3%, the CEO was a personal sponsor for these projects. So, in a way, it has to be top-led. It has to be top-led because what happens is this is something which is a new area. Anything new, people are always scared of two things. They're scared of change and they're scared of risk. And the problems of change, unless the C-suite actually pushes it through, it's something which becomes a big rock again. Okay. So if you really want to get things going, the C-suite has to be convinced and has to be behind the project and be fully, onboarded with that. Now, how do we get that? There again, as you say, the involvement of government, institutions, but also academia. I think all three of them need to really work in tandem. Somehow or the other, in India, I find that the gap between industry and academia has still not got, fixed.
Yeah.
We are still on two different kind of pedestals, two different kind of platforms. And even though a number of attempts have been made to bring them together, we don't still see them working together as much as they need to. Yes, there is a movement towards it. I see many of the IIMs and I chair one of them. And we really and truly make an attempt to ensure that we are getting more and more people from industry to come and speak because we want that connect, to happen. But I think, these three pillars really need to get together if you want that C-suite connect. Because otherwise, you're definitely not going to be able to convince these people that we are not in step with the rest of the world. And the end result of this could only be that we become, maybe not laggards, but we become followers rather than the ones that are doing it first.
Yeah, Sangita, your take on this and any learnings that you want to share. And by the way, you are the best example that I can think of. And I always, give your example when I'm talking about the need for bilinguals, because to me, the line between you as the medical professional and the line between you as the digital expert has completely vanished. I mean, it's sort of both have come together so beautifully. But how do other CEOs build this, or how do they get that right talent in the C-suite to help them drive these massive transformations?
So I think it's a really fundamental question, and Arundhati explained, the importance of having all this aligned. So I'm just going to, talk very situationally right now, because all of us still have that the C word at the back of our head. And I think COVID-19 really accelerated many companies' digital communication strategies. And I think it was Twilio who said that they accelerated it by almost 6 years. And this is sometimes a crisis, which we should never waste, becomes this rapid technological shift point. And I think that companies who were preparing for this shift were able to adapt much better. But everybody is very clear that they need to adapt and transform. And now any big transformation needs a strong champion. And while it is critical to have the CEO as very much having this overarching view, creating the full buy-in from the C-suite, I just want to add this one line that I think that in addition to these points that Arundhati made, it is important for the CIO or the CTO, whichever designation, or both of them together, to start thinking themselves, changing their mindset from a functional role of someone who kept the electricity supply up to a strategic business leader who's helping the transformation of this organization and hence enabling this organization to stay alive and relevant. And that shift is, I think, at the heart of so much of the way that we're viewing the use of AI and the digital transformation and the new business orientation. And India can actually, if we get that right, I believe that this can become one of our big differentiators because we have the data. We have the tech teams available who can build cost-effective AI models. And AI, by very nature, like IT, are globally pervasive. And therefore, this is a methodology for India to influence so many other spheres beyond their physical limitations. So I'm super excited about the potential, about the use. And I would just say that it is the CEO, it is the C-suite, it is the underlying technology, it is the customer view and the eureka moment. But finally, it is about the CIO beginning to say that I am a strategic business leader, I am a strategic enabler of this company's future. And then many things start flowing.
Absolutely. In fact, I think there are two roles that got completely disrupted. I mean, every role got disrupted, but two roles that got, I think, massively disrupted in the pandemic. One was the CIO role, because it just had to be reimagined given the opportunities. And the other one was the HR role, which again had to be completely reimagined given the challenges. Sangita, on that note, I was very disappointed recently to see a global survey that had ranked the countries where the fear of automation is still high. And India, unfortunately, is still one of the countries where the fear of automation and therefore connected with the fear of job loss is still incredibly high. And we all know that it's a highly misplaced fear because technologies like AI, if anything, are creating more jobs. But yes, the jobs that are getting created require new skills. If you do not reskill, then you're not going to qualify for these jobs. And that definitely is a problem. But how are you managing this mindset, the blockage that we have right now about automation, etc., which is prevalent in most organizations, and how are you moving the organization towards skilling, upskilling, new jobs versus being stuck in this is what I do and I'm not going to become relevant?
So Debjani, this is a perfect segue for me to start off by saying that we're moving with NASSCOM in partnership with your great learning initiative that you've started. And I think you're very much helping us in this journey of upskilling our people. But on a more serious note, coming back to the very important point you raised, I think the fundamental fact is that change of any kind is always accompanied by fear. And it's a natural sentiment for people to resist fear. And yet, if we can concretely make people see that it's not just a matter of transformation, it's not what's good for the company, it's actually critical for everyone's survival. And when done right, the process will actually be easy and make life a lot more fun. The reality is actually that AI will double the rate of innovation improvements in India, but it will also and can also double employee productivity gains in India. It can drive competitive advantages and it can augment and not displace jobs. So to say this may be easy, but we have to bring this alive in multiple examples. So first we go to the automation step. So if I look at, the way nurses used to keep records before, copious notes, lots of registers, lots of papers. Then we kind of began to move to, the electronic health record or documentation. And now when we merge care pathways into it, it's an auto prompt. So we begin to tell nurses that, look, remember you had to call the doctor, ask him X, Y, Z, then he would explain to you. But imagine if it's already auto on the screen telling you that this is the correct pathway. And that this is also being shown in the doctor's screen, and you have alerts, and and ultimately your patient, survival, recovery is going to be better, your complication rates are going to be low. So I always, try to communicate extensively, but communicate in the simple language that they will understand, which is what relates to their work. And so that is, I think, point number one. Good communication and an appreciation of the overall impact of what AI can do. The second one is really about having robust champions in the C-suite, because, and in the C-suite here, I actually mean that it's robust champions in the doctor suite as well. Because as much as management or the CIO says, if the doctor walks in and says, hey, this is waste of time, do what I tell you, then it's not going to happen. So we need the doctors to embrace as well, and to really help to bridge the gaps, make it closer, and therefore let our human capital feel that they will be more productive. And they will have time to stand and talk to the patient because they weren't spending half an hour copying notes or orders. It is these type of examples which will help them, I want them to ask the question, how did we ever manage without this? Yeah. That is when we reach that point, that the journey is really going to be a little bit of smooth sailing. But there's skilling, there's the concept of a digital first organization, there's the realization that the journey is not easy and that it is a tough and lot of work. And just by saying, get this IT done, it's not going to happen. And it's not the IT department's job, it's a whole organization transformation job which is happening.
Absolutely. And I think everything you said, the one big takeaway from me is at the heart of this transformation has to be people and not technology. It has to be built around people with that in mind. And if you have that kind of a mindset, you will take people along with you. And I think that's what is so important.
Let me give one example here.
Sure.
And especially because ours was a legacy bank, in State Bank of India, when I took over and I first said that we need a digital transformation. So many people came and said, what is this digital transformation? We already have internet banking. We have mobile banking. What are you talking about? So, I took the risk of saying that, okay, let's show them what digital transformation will do. And we created 7 branches, and we created these branches in malls, the best malls in the best metros. Okay, so 7 of them. And I did this purposely because I wanted both our staff and their families, as well as our customers and families, to actually come in on holidays or any other days and actually play around in those branches. And these branches looked entirely different. So you had the first entrance where you had all the machines, that is the ATM, the cash deposit machine, the check deposit machine, the passbook printer, the multi-service kiosk, all of that was there. And this was supposed to be open 24/7. So there was a shutter that could be put down, and these are open 24/7, and this is DIY. Once you go into the branch itself looked very different. We had huge screens, and on those screens you could play around, you could play around and say, I want a car loan, used car, new car. This is my budget. It will show you all the models in that budget. Thereafter, it's going to show you what social media is saying about it, what the producer, the manufacturer is saying about it. Then it asks you, do you need a loan? And then asks you a few basic questions and tells you probably you will qualify for so much. But if you put in so much margin, this could be the interest. So there were sliders that you could play along with. And you could do this for everything. Means the idea was you could do a 3D walk through the homes that you may want to buy. You can do a 3D walk through the educational campuses that you may want to visit. So, stuff where you could really play along with your family. And then we had these desks, which looked like desks out of Star Trek, which had these little screens on which you could put your investments down. What investments you have? What are the goals? You want to go for a foreign trip. How much do you need to save? How can you save that? So all of that, plus kiosks, with the experts at the other side who could actually guide you through any questions, etc. that you have. So, branches that were totally had a different color scheme. There were only 2 or 3 people over there, and you could open your accounts with just your Aadhaar and then walk out with a pre-printed, customized debit card all in 20 minutes. Okay. So we created these 7 branches. Now, they were not very, they were difficult to create in the sense that they were costly. But I said that, this is important for people to understand what digital can do. And a lot of people told me this is counterintuitive. You are trying to put them on the digital platform and you're creating branches. So I said, unless and until you quantify it into something so that people can see and feel and hear, they will not change their perception. So the perception when I went in was that this is a papa's bank or a grandfather's bank. The perception after all of these things started happening was, wow, this institution seems to be, understanding it, seems to be getting it. We, of course, scaled down those branches for later ones. We just took the initiatives that worked, left out the others, and we had these 24/7 enclosures. But I think, it made a big difference in the way people bought into the story. So that buying into the story of rank and file is what the C-suite really needs to drive.
So, and I just want to add one point, Debjani, to Arundhati, that based on this tremendous background that she built, Apollo 24/7 is partnered with SBI on their platform. So we're just digital together to offer customers a very seamless access. So it was based on the groundwork that you did, Arundhati, and we're really happy for the partnership. Rajneesh carried on the torch that you had lit, and it enabled us to reach out to so many people.
In fact, back to my Intel days, I was so impressed with the work that Arundhati was doing to take digitization through the bank at the grassroots levels. We were actually working with them to drive digital literacy through a lot of these efforts. So Arundhati, what you built there has actually created a foundation for a lot of us, I think, to amplify our grassroots level digital efforts. So, I mean, kudos to you. I always hate wrapping up a great conversation, but unfortunately, the time is the enemy here. But I can't let you both go without asking one question. If India were to have an AI minister, like some of the countries that are now coming up with this position, and Sangita and Arundhati, if you guys had the job for a day, what would be your biggest priorities?
Okay, so Sangita, do you want the first dibs on this?
Arundhati, maybe you're closer to ministry positions than I am, so I don't think
no longer. But I would take the development and the diffusion of AI to be the two pillars, that I really do want to go after. Development, how do you develop? What are the things that make for the enablers of actually doing it? So whether it be policy, whether it be skilling, whether it be showing value, what is it that will enable it to develop? And on the other hand, what I would take up is diffusion. And for diffusion, it's a question, it's something that can be taken up by every single corporate. It can be taken up by bodies like NASSCOM. How do you ensure that you really democratize AI? Because at the end of the day, what we really want to do, India is a country with a very large population. We will not be able to give the benefits of digitalization to the entire population unless and until we find ways of ensuring that people have access to it, that we can really, the diffusion happens right down to the bottom. And that is what, should be the aim of any ministry or any central nodal agency, as to work on development on the one hand and diffusion on the other. I think those would be the two pillars.
Brilliant. Sangita, your take?
So, of course, nobody can, argue with what Arundhati said. I completely agree. I would just take one step before that, and that is wide-scale communication to demystify AI. Because somehow people are thinking that it's some high-end, robotics and AI all get spoken of in the same tone. And actually, AI is something which can be simplified, embedded, articulated, and therefore made more pervasive. So I would see this as a role to create a foundation for acceleration and adoption. And whether that means, policy framework, which includes safety, accountability, efficacy, and all the fears, so remove the fear, enable integrity of a model, whether it's the algorithm or wherever, and seek fairness, inclusive, and equity in the entire process, because you have made it so pervasive.
Brilliant. Absolutely. I mean, both the answers were just so brilliant, and I hope the right people are listening. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I really
Pleasure
am honored.
talking. Pleasure talking to you, and definitely happy to be sharing a platform with Arundhati. All the very best for the summit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good
The
luck.
same here.
Namaste.
Thank you, Debjani, Arundhati, and Sangita for that candid and interactive session. Some great takeaways there, and it was a pleasure hosting you. Thank you once again.